In the 1980s, a pastor and his wife decided their God was telling them to start a television network. Their names were Marcus and Joni Lamb, but these weren't Hollywood people. They were a couple of Southerners with stars in their eyes who dreamt of being on TV. Marcus and Joni built their fledgling Christian TV network into a $225 million giant, known as Daystar. The Daystar network broadcasted internationally and built up a loyal audience with millions of daily viewers. And if you know of Kenneth Copeland, Joel Osteen, or Joyce Meyer, then whether you're aware of it or not, you know of Daystar, as those big names all have their shows on Daystar's network. Marcus and Joni became multi-millionaires, living in mansions and raising their 3 children with no expense spared. Once adults, the Lamb children all became executives at Daystar, as did their spouses. It was truly a tax-free family affair. See, while Daystar has no regular church services and no congregation because it's a broadcasting company, the IRS allows them to classify their TV network as a church. Therefore, everything is tax-exempt, including the company's private jet that they took family vacations on. But that would be the least of their troubles. Daystar isn't run like a corporate enterprise. It's run like a family business, full of drama, scandal, and dirty secrets. Secrets that became known to the public once one of their adult children had enough. He not only stood up to his parents, but told the world what they had done and the monsters they protected once the cameras and lights were off. Suddenly, news outlets were reporting on the Lamb family drama. Their biggest show ponies pulled their shows off the Daystar network, and viewers demanded their donations back. This is a story of family, a story of scandal, and a story of deep betrayal by a mother who claims to love her son.
I woke up, opened my eyes, and looked out to the darkening skies. The world has gone crazy as blood fills the streets. Steal, kill, destroy, the cycle repeats, but we cannot give in to these destructive forces that many digest like a meal with.
This is the rise and fall of Daystar.
We flee from the truth and drink up the lies as we confuse our youth. Oh, but don't lose heart and don't you
Before we begin, a quick word from the sponsor of this video, Delete Me. Let's talk about something creepy: data brokers. Data brokers are corporations that collect huge amounts of personally identifiable information. Things like social security numbers, birthdays, past and recent addresses, and more, and package it all together to sell our personal information to anyone willing to pay, putting us at risk for identity theft or worse. No federal privacy laws for how our data is mined and shared currently exist. And in 2022, the most targeted age group for identity theft were 30 to 39-year-olds. It makes sense when there's so much of our personal information getting shared online without our consent. But trying to remove one's name, age, address, phone number, past addresses, and the names of relatives can be time-consuming and stressful. Instead of spending countless hours finding every website on the internet that contains your private info and submitting requests to get it taken down, get it done in minutes with Delete Me. Delete Me is an amazing service that will not just find and remove your personal information from hundreds of data broker websites, but they'll continuously scan for new data that shows up and get that removed as well. Delete Me searches all the top data broker websites, and on average, they find and remove over 2,000 pieces of personal data for a customer in their first 2 years. To date, they've removed over 100 million pieces of data for their customers. So if you want to get your personal information removed from search results on the web, go to joindeleteme.com/notthegoodgirl. Delete Me is offering 20% off their privacy plans to all my viewers with my code NOTTHEGOODGIRL. Once again, that's joindeleteme.com/notthegoodgirl. Now, back to the video. To understand how Marcus and Joni Lamb became Christian broadcasting royalty, we need to go back to their roots, which for Marcus Lamb began on October 7, 1957, in Cordele, Georgia, also known as the watermelon capital of the world. Marcus Lamb Sr. and Mary Louise Lamb ended up raising Marcus in Macon, Georgia, where he claims at the age of 5 he accepted Christ into his heart. Not much is known about Marcus's childhood, but he likes to tell the story of how he began preaching at 15 years old. 1 year later, he skipped his senior year of high school and enrolled at Lee University, then known as Lee College. He received a full scholarship and majored in theology. After graduation and throughout the 1970s, Marcus began traveling the United States as a traveling evangelist. During one of his visits to South Carolina in 1980, he stopped in Greenville to preach at a Pentecostal revival happening at a local church. It was during his sermon where he laid eyes on a girl named Joni and felt his heart flutter. Joni Trammell was born in Colleyville, Texas in July of 1960. When she saw Marcus preaching that day at her family church, she was taken by the way he commanded the room of believers. The two soon began dating, eventually becoming Mr. and Mrs. Marcus and Joni Lamb 2 years later in 1982. 1 year prior, Marcus had started the Word of God Fellowship in Macon, Georgia, and it's unclear whether this was a church with a building or just what Marcus called his traveling ministry. In my research, I assumed the latter, being that the newlyweds hit the road to preach in 20 different states, with Joni singing before every sermon Marcus preached. But constant travel across the country wasn't conducive to starting a family, nor did being a traveling minister pay very well. On a trip to Israel less than a year into their marriage, Marcus claimed his God spoke to him, instructing him to build a TV station. They invested what savings they had. Joni claimed they dug a transmitter out of a dumpster, and their first station was started in 1985 in Montgomery, Alabama. It was called WMCF-TV, but they called it 45 Alive. It was the first Christian TV station in the state. At the time, Marcus was 28 years old and Joni 25. Not long after, their first child was born. His name was Jonathan. Elated as brand new parents, Marcus and Joni never could have realized that their baby boy would one day light the match that would start the process of burning their empire to the ground. Their daughter Rachel was born in 1990, and that same year they sold WMCF-TV to the Trinity Broadcasting Network, also known as TBN. TBN is the largest Christian-based TV network in the world. With cash in their pockets and feeling like a change, the Lambs packed up and moved to Texas, where they launched a new station in Dallas called KMPX-TV29. TV29's first live broadcast was of T.D. Jakes' New Year's Eve service at the Potter's House Church. In 1992, Marcus and Joni had their last child, a girl named Rebecca. They were now a family of 5. By this time, TV29 was reaching 6 million viewers and doing so well that they decided to expand. On New Year's Day in 1998, they launched the Daystar television network. They chose the name Daystar after a Bible verse. 2 Peter chapter 1 verse 19 reads, "We have also a more sure word of prophecy, whereunto ye do well that ye take heed, as unto a light that shineth in a dark place, until the day dawn, and the Daystar arise in your hearts." As the Daystar Network hosted a lineup of pastors who paid for broadcasting, including Kenneth Copeland, Marcus himself was also part of that lineup, and Joni decided she wanted a show of her own. It was a women's show called Taking a Break with Joni, later renamed to just Joni. In those early days, hardly anyone attended their shows, and staff members were sometimes made to fill in as the studio audience. But that wouldn't last for long. By 2003, Daystar moved into a 90,000 square foot building that gave them 17 highly developed studios to shoot from, as well as the ability to use more special effects. That same year, a pastor who had only been preaching for about 4 years decided he wanted to be on TV. His church was called Lakewood Church and located in Houston, Texas. His name was Joel Osteen, and he launched his show on the Daystar Network. Big names like Jesse Duplantis, Joyce Meyer, and the infamous Hillsong Church would soon join the broadcast lineup, and Daystar kept getting luckier and luckier. With Marcus's ties to Israel, Daystar was given a license by the Israeli government in 2006 to become the first and only Christian TV network in the entire country. Under the Lambs' leadership, Daystar not only grew into 100 television stations across the U.S., but became prominent on every major cable and satellite provider in the world.
Well, a new segment for Daystar called the Celebration Creature Feature. And we've got Chris here from the Fort Worth Zoo.
There you go.
Chris, it is so great to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Oh, my.
Oh, my goodness.
This is Kristen. Kristen is bringing...
Hi.
This is
Kristen,
Betty.
You're not scared of Betty?
Hi, Betty. Yes, very interesting.
And she is a Burmese python. You have nothing to worry about. She's not going to hurt you.
I think it likes Joni.
Did you feed her? Did you feed her before she came today?
You know what? She only gets fed on Tuesdays, so you
Do
have nothing to worry
pythons
about.
like to eat lambs? They don't eat lambs, do they?
Not this size. When she's full grown, she'll eat a lot larger food.
Look, she's coming over here to me.
Honey, you know what? There's a scripture in the Bible that says that if you take up serpents,
Yes.
they'll not harm you.
Right now, she is about 11 feet long. We can kind of stretch her
Yeah.
down this way a little bit. If you can grab
Okay,
this
and
end down here.
how
There we
much
go.
does she weigh, Chris?
She weighs about 45 pounds right now.
And how big will she get?
When she's full grown, she'll be about 20 feet long and
Oh,
will
my
weigh well
Lord.
over 200
She's
pounds.
beautiful, isn't she?
20 feet long.
Oh, yeah, she still has a lot of
She's
growing
just
to
a
do.
baby.
Yep, she's about 8 years old right now.
Oh, really?
Oh, my
Okay.
goodness. So will she ever have any
Oh,
babies?
her texture is just...
Not likely. She's housed by herself.
Oh, she
And-
is?
yes.
Okay.
Well, let's get her a boyfriend.
Get her
I mean,
a
a
boyfriend?
husband. Wait, this is Christian television. Get her a husband.
According to their website, Daystar is broadcast in over 2.3 billion homes worldwide. By now, Daystar was bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars a year. After graduating from Oral Roberts University, their son Jonathan became director of operations at Daystar. He met and fell in love with a woman named Suzy. Suzy studied divinity at Christ for the Nations Bible College and business at Dallas Baptist University. After Jonathan and Suzy married, the couple began hosting a show on Daystar called The Green Room. Marcus and Joni were so happy their eldest chose Suzy as his wife.
I wanted to say something about Suzy. She has brought so much joy and love and fun into our family.
Yes, she has.
And Jonathan, you and the Lord did great in choosing
Chose well.
Suzy.
Yeah,
I'm gonna cry.
Thank you so much. I'm blessed. I definitely think God had something to do with it and directing me to her and giving me the confirmation that she was the one that made it easy on my part.
Thank
And,
you.
And we thought so early on, if you remember correctly, we kind of found out.
Because I said, what about that Suzy girl? I like her.
Somehow I found it out and I looked her up on Facebook. You weren't quite as Facebook savvy as me.
I still am not.
And then I showed you a picture and you were like, oh, she's a beautiful girl. And so we started asking Jonathan questions like, where is that?
And
where's that
Jonathan
one
was
girl?
not very forthcoming. He was very guarded.
Yeah.
And-
Jonathan has to think things through.
Well,
does.
I'm never going to divulge too much about somebody until I know for sure.
He's
I
a
don't
secret
wanna-
squirrel.
Rachel, the second oldest lamb child, is director of communications at Daystar. She's married to a man named Josh Brown. Together, they regularly appear on Daystar's Ministry Now show. Josh was born and raised in Australia and is Daystar's director of business development. The youngest lamb, Rebecca, hosts a podcast that her husband Jonathan is executive producer of. Jonathan goes by the nickname JW. Along with his wife's podcast, JW also handles some behind-the-scenes operations at Daystar, and he and Rebecca are sometimes on-air contributors. The Daystar network had truly become a family affair, and each child had been born into a life of luxury. Marcus himself drove a Maserati, the Lamb children attended expensive private schools growing up, had their university tuition paid for, drove luxury cars that belonged to Daystar, and documents show that Rebecca's husband, JW, was given a loan from Daystar in the amount of $780,000 to purchase their home, meaning he didn't owe a bank for their mortgage. Their mortgage was owned by Daystar. With the adult children and their spouses on payroll, and with Daystar loaning them their most basic needs and more, Marcus and Joni had full control of their livelihoods that would be fraught with tension, control, and scandal. But more on that later. Together, Marcus and Joni hosted Daystar's flagship show called Celebration. The show was an hour-long program broadcast 5 days a week. Joni also loved to perform with the Daystar band. Marcus and Joni were very careful about their family image, making sure that employees photoshopped their waists, whitened their teeth, and made them appear younger in every image. Their entire media room was behind a locked door, and the Lambs told their media employees if it ever got out that they were photoshopped, they would be terminated immediately. Here's a former Daystar employee talking about that very thing.
I had been there for quite a while before I had earned any sort of trust to do some of the more secretive things that they did. And so, for example, the marketing department was behind closed doors. You had to have a key to get into it. It was locked. And I never understood that. Why is it behind locked doors? Until one day, Jeanette came to me and said, I'm entrusting you with photoshopping the latest Lamb family photo shoot. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, well, we have a very carefully crafted image of the family. And so the photos have to be retouched in a very specific way. So behind a locked door, with her standing over my shoulder, she supervised me as I photoshopped these images to make Joni look thinner, to make them all look younger, to whiten their teeth, to slim their waistlines, all these things. And I just remember thinking how silly it was, because the person in this image was 25, 30 years younger than them in real life. It was so silly. And I felt like I worked for the Secret Service or something. Like, I was not allowed to talk about the fact that I photoshopped those images. Jeanette threatened me, if you ever tell anyone this is what we do, you'll be terminated. It was a big deal.
Their show Celebration was eventually renamed to The Marcus and Joni Show, and then renamed once more to Ministry Now. Marcus and Joni were living the high life. Daystar now had $222 million in assets. The couple purchased a mega mansion and bought a private jet, all on Daystar's dime. They took the family on luxurious vacations and classified them as work retreats. Therefore, they became just another Daystar business expense that could be written off. The couple eventually purchased multiple mansions, with 2 shown here. One mansion they call their lake house, and 2 mansions are on the same street, and they also own a high-rise condo overlooking the Florida Panhandle Beach. But the IRS was not a fan of the couple living large on a tax-free organization's dime. But according to the IRS's own rules, TV networks that have ministry shows can be classified as a church, therefore operating exactly as tax-free churches do. People also became more suspicious of Daystar when NPR did an article on them. While giving a sermon in 2009 in Australia, Marcus boasted about their charitable donations, saying, quote, "In the last 5 years, Daystar has written checks of donations to others, to ministries, to churches, to missions, to hurricane relief, to tsunami relief, to hospitals, etc., to the tune of $30 million cash," end quote. But once NPR went over 6 years of Daystar's financial statements with a fine-tooth comb, they found Daystar only gave away $9.7 million, not $30 million, meaning Daystar's charitable contributions amounted to only 5% of their donor revenue. But the article didn't hurt Marcus and Joni at all. Their lineup of televangelists who were doing the exact same thing didn't care, and the people at home who sent in money, jewelry, and the deeds to their houses continued to give without hesitation. Everything was picture perfect for the Lamb family. But sometimes, when something seems like heaven, there's often hell to pay. And that's exactly what happened to Marcus when he began being blackmailed for $7 million. In 2010, Marcus began privately receiving threats. Marcus tried to ignore it as long as he could, but eventually the blackmailers threatened him with a date they would make everything known to the public.
This is a very special program because we are going to be sharing our heart with you today. And I just want to say right at the front, sweetheart, that you and I are strong, and I think that our marriage is better today than it has ever been.
You are just an absolute angel, and I am madly in love with you, and you mean so much to me.
However, I do want to share something with you. And it is this. About, several years ago, Marcus and I went through a challenge in our marriage. And I discovered that he was having an emotional relationship, if you will, with someone, and that it had turned into an improper relationship.
I take 100% responsibility. Joni has no blame. The other person doesn't have any blame. It's all, I don't even blame the devil. It's all on me.
These are some of our most private moments, but there actually are 3 people who were not involved in what we're talking about today or affected by our marital challenge. They're now saying that unless Daystar pays them $7.5 million, that they're going to take our story that we just shared with you to the media.
You see, these 3 people that Joni shared with you, they're trying to take our pain and turn it to their gain. But ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to take God's money and pay to keep from being humiliated, I guess, or exposed, or exploited, whatever you want to call it. I'm so sorry. I've asked God to forgive me years ago. I asked my precious Joni, and when this first came out, I said to her, I said, honey, I only want us to stay together if we really love one another, not for the ministry's sake, not even for our kids' sake. And ladies and gentlemen, I love this woman.
After having his wife announce his affair, what Marcus didn't say in that broadcast was that his affair, which had started when Marcus and Joni were in their early 40s, had gone on for 7 long years, and Daystar money, not personal funds, had been used in the affair. He also didn't say who it was with. It was none other than Daystar's Vice President of Programming and Sales, a woman named Janice Smith, to whom Daystar paid lots of hush money upon her exit from the company. The Daystar IT department found emails between the two containing lewd statements, and another from Marcus that read, "I cannot wait to make you the next Mrs. Lamb." But even worse, Marcus and Joni completely lied. They weren't being blackmailed at all. They were being sued by 3 former employees, and the affair, along with the emails, were mentioned in the lawsuit. Marcus and Joni were trying to get out in front of the lawsuit before the court documents were made public. On November 18th of 2010, the Lambs were served a letter stating they were being sued by their 3 previous Daystar employees. And wouldn't you know it, only 12 days later, Marcus and Joni aired their celebration broadcast in which they said they were victims of blackmail and admitted to Marcus's affair. After this happened, Marcus called all the employees down to the studio because he had an announcement. Once everybody was there, he sternly said, "If any of you are thinking about suing Daystar, you better think again, because we just finished taking care of 3 people who tried to bamboozle Daystar." The meeting lasted only 10 minutes before everyone was told to return to work. And by taking care of, Marcus meant they had countersued the 3 employees, but down the road, both lawsuits were eventually dropped. But at the time, only 2 months after the first lawsuit, they were sued again by another employee who claimed Joni's father, Bill Trammell, who also worked at Daystar, sexually harassed her by touching her inappropriately during what he called quiet time. The lawsuit was filed in Dallas and alleged that Joni's father, Bill, created a hostile work environment. Some of the documents from the lawsuit read, quote, "During quiet time, Mr. Trammell would make the plaintiff hug him tightly for extended periods of time. He would often put his hands very close to the plaintiff's breasts or buttocks during these extended touchings. On more than 2 occasions, Mr. Trammell told the plaintiff to sit on his lap." End quote. Marcus and Joni called the claims outrageous and denied anything had ever happened. A Daystar employee even mentioned in one of the lawsuits that Joni was so controlling that she told her who she could and could not date. Then Marcus and Joni went even further, deciding to appear on Dr. Phill in 2010, in Season 9, Episode 63, titled Scandal in the Ministry, where they perpetuated their lies by stating 3 individuals had said if they didn't pay them $7 million, they would make the affair known to the media. Because Dr. Phil's team loves to hit YouTubers with copyright strikes, I can't play the audio for you from the show, but I'll tell you that Joni was made out to be the hero of the story who said, "We're not paying the extortionists that money. We will share our story and come clean." Joni also went on to say that she had always been the woman who said if her husband ever cheated on her, she'd get divorced. But she said she prayed about it and her God told her that Marcus was worth fighting for. But if they had got divorced, while Joni would have got a nice payout and possibly alimony, who knows if she would have been allowed to stay on at Daystar? Especially since in Christianity, the men are considered the leaders and a woman's role is only to support her man and the family. She most likely would have lost her shows and her job. Marcus went on to tell Dr. Phill the reason they didn't make the affair known was because their counselors told them if they put the affair out to the public, they wouldn't be able to fully heal. So they continued presenting a picture-perfect Christian image of marital harmony while daily asking for viewer donations. While on Dr. Phill, Joni referred to the affair as a trap Marcus fell into and blamed social media for wrecking relationships, saying that the couple now has each other's passwords for all social media accounts and computers. When Dr. Phill asked Joni why she wanted to come on the show, she said it was to help others see a way through something like this, as she's always been passionate about helping people. Dr. Phill then asks Marcus, "Why did you never come forward before this alleged extortion attempt?" To which Marcus replied, quote, Well, Joni and I wanted to have plenty of time to heal. We wanted to have a track record of living right and doing right. Plus, our children were young, and we wanted to spare them the pain of this until they could at least be old enough to be able to handle it better. End quote. Joni added that they had always planned to share their story since they had always shared everything with their audience. Dr. Phill brought on the Lambs' marriage counselors, two friends of theirs who are regular on-air contributors on their show. The bigoted male counselor was quoted as saying, "At least he had an affair with a Christian woman and not a transvestite." Marcus later told Dr. Phill, quote, "You know, so many other shows have invited us on, but most of them, it's a sensational angle. But we know how loving and redemptive you are to help people, and we felt safe to come and share my heart. If somehow I have to be humiliated to help prevent somebody else from getting in a situation like this, or if they're in a trap right now that maybe this will give them hope and they'll get out of that trap and they can be healed, then that's why we're here to share today." End quote. There was no mention of court records that would have detailed the affair, and no mention that the so-called extortionists were actually former employees who had to endure years of covering for Marcus and his mistress's lies, which put them in a toxic work environment and under such an extreme amount of stress that one of them had to be hospitalized. No, Marcus and Joni had gone on Dr. Phill out of the goodness of their hearts, and it worked. Their television audience forgave them, Dr. Phill threw them softball questions, and none of the lawsuits touched the Lambs during all of this. Marcus and Joni had got out in front of it and spun the narrative just in time. In fact, these lawsuits wouldn't be examined again until 13 years later in 2024. But back in 2010, the Lambs had an image to uphold and wanted to move forward after their Dr. Phill appearance. After all, Daystar was now the second largest Christian television network in the world, and only a couple years before, in 2008, Joni released her first book, an autobiography titled Surrender All: Your Answer to Living with Peace, Power, and Purpose. Joni was determined her book would be on a bestsellers list no matter what. In an article from that time, NPR reported, quote, "According to court records, Daystar's primary revenue comes from selling airtime to other religious programmers. Its secondary income is donations. The documents show that between 2005 and 2011, Daystar took in $208 million in tax-deductible contributions from viewers through on-air pitches. Moreover, evangelists who bought airtime on Daystar or appeared as guests on the network received more than $500,000. Of that sum, $92,000 went to the Reverend T.L. Lowry and his foundation, on whose board of directors Marcus sits. But that's not all. The article goes on to say, Daystar spent non-donation ministry income on expenses that included over $572,000 in sponsorship and expenses for a Christian NASCAR driver named Blake Cook, a $2.3 million loan to Reverend Frank Harbor, Marcus's former special assistant and golfing buddy, to start a church that defaulted on the loan, and $97,320 spent at retail bookstores to buy up copies of Joni Lamb's autobiography, Surrender All, helping to drive it onto a bestsellers list. End quote. Daystar responded to NPR that the $100,000 they spent on Joni's books were given away as premiums to donors. Regardless, Joni got herself on the bestsellers list. Not long after the announcement of the affair, Marcus and Joni began having a man named Doug Weiss as a regular on-air contributor regarding relationships. Doug Weiss claims to be a recovered sex addict. He's a psychologist and the founder of Heart to Heart Counseling Center, which specializes in treating sex addicts and their spouses. Doug's wife Lisa worked with him at his counseling center, and the couple did many outreach projects together. Over time, Doug and Lisa became good friends of the Lambs. Doug likes to talk about genitalia a lot. In the following clip, he takes Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and distorts it to match his sermon on the male anatomy. Romans 12:1 states, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Here's a video of Doug talking about having a blessed penis.
You can have a cursed penis, or you can have a blessed penis. I'm in for blessed penis, amen? If you're going to have a penis, you might as well have a blessed one, amen? All right, so I want to tell you how to walk under sexual authority. Okay, here it is. Let's go back to, let's go to the book of Romans for a moment. I'm going to give you the three owners of your penises, three owners of your penis. So if you're writing, that's what it would be. Three owners, okay? Sorry, my Bible wants to go the wrong direction. Okay, Romans, there we go. Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in the view of God's mercy, to offer your penises as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Now, I know I took a little liberty with the words bodies. How many of your penis is connected to your body? Okay, good. If you have problems with that, see a doctor. Okay, so, but the first owner of your penis is God.
Marcus and Joni's former executive assistant from 2007 to 2011 was interviewed by the Roy's Report. Her name is Lisa Anderson. Lisa shared what really went on behind the scenes from her time there. Joni regularly came into work with her hair wet and no makeup on so she could get it done by the Daystar hair and makeup team before going on set to film her show. Something pretty normal in the entertainment industry. But Joni wanted to be waited on hand and foot. She refused to put gas in her own car or even touch her gas tank, nor did she clean her own car. She had a member of the Daystar security team fill up her gas tank and clean her car on money provided by viewers to be Daystar donations. She even made sure that when she left work, somebody on the Daystar security team had her car running with the door open the minute she came out of the building. If it was during the hot summer months, he was supposed to have the door closed and the AC on for a while before she left so it would be cool once she got in the car. But that was nothing compared to how she treated those who worked closest with her. She would ask her executive assistant Lisa political questions, specifically what she thought about Obama being president. Lisa tried to avoid mixing politics and work as much as possible, but Joni was constantly overstepping. Lisa was given a Daystar BlackBerry phone and was on call for Joni 24/7, even on holidays. One Thanksgiving day, while Lisa was eating with her family at her parents' house, Joni called her and asked her to go to a bakery and pick up a cake and drop it off at her house on the kitchen counter. But the house wasn't empty when Lisa arrived. The Lamb family was inside their dining room enjoying their Thanksgiving meal. So Lisa left the cake on the counter unacknowledged and left the Lamb family mansion to return to finish celebrating the holiday with her family. Worse than that was the time Joni had Lisa handle her stool samples. For medical reasons, Joni needed to send off her stool samples to be tested, so she had Lisa bag her stool in biohazard bags. Lisa then went home and baked it into a pie and told Joni, "Eat my shit." Just kidding. Unfortunately, Lisa had to mail off Joni's poop to get tested. Lisa had been single the entire time she worked for Joni, until she met a man and fell in love. When the couple got engaged, Joni demanded to know what Lisa's fiancé did for work and wanted to meet him, which made Lisa feel uncomfortable. She said it wasn't long before Joni hired another assistant, claiming the new hire was Lisa's assistant. But Lisa noticed she began being left out while the new hire accompanied Joni to important things like executive meetings and trips. Joni also started telling the new hire things about her work schedule that an executive assistant would need to know, but didn't tell Lisa. Lisa could tell she was getting pushed out, but she said Joni liked to cover her bases, so she threw Lisa a farewell party to make it look like she was leaving on her own accord. This wasn't the first time Joni behaved this way with an employee who had found love. Lisa alleged Joni didn't like it when one of the Daystar singers began dating another member of the Daystar band. The man ended up quitting, and Joni didn't speak to the singer for some time. Lisa noticed that many of the women who found true love would not be at Daystar for very long. She assumed this was because Joni liked having people on call 24/7 and didn't want her needs to be interrupted by another person's spouse who might be critical of the time they spent away from home attending to Joni. Some other things Lisa noticed during her 4 years at Daystar were that while the Lamb girls were allowed to wear short skirts, Joni would get on to any employee who dared to wear a spaghetti strap shirt. Another thing she noticed was that Rebecca and Rachel, who were both in college at the time, were put on salary while not working at Daystar. Lisa said occasionally they would come on to a show to smile and say hi for a small segment, especially because Marcus loved having them there. But they didn't actually do much, and they certainly didn't work there regularly. One time, while Joni was getting her makeup done for a show, Rachel was lying on a couch in the same room, playing on her phone. She looked up at Joni and asked, "Mom, are we rich?" To which Joni responded, "We're comfortable." Lisa noticed that any time one of the Lamb children got a speeding ticket or something worse, it was always taken care of by an attorney they had on retainer, but she never noticed the Lamb children be held accountable for their actions. Although Lisa was a Daystar employee, the Lamb adult children became part of her tasks, like when she had to plan and book Rachel's graduation trip out of the country at Joni's request. Lisa told Rachel she needed to see her passport to make sure everything was up to date. Rachel refused and told her not to worry because everything was fine. But Rachel arrived at the airport only to discover her passport had indeed expired. Lisa got a call from a frantic Joni asking if there was anywhere Rachel could go without a passport. So Lisa, last minute, had to rebook Rachel's trip to another country that accepted entry with only a birth certificate. Rachel's graduation trip, Joni's stool samples, and the Thanksgiving cake are just a few examples of Joni's personal demands on a Daystar employee. And while someone may say all of this is just he said, she said, there are court documents validating what Lisa has said. In 2010, 1 year before Lisa was pushed out of Daystar, a wrongful termination lawsuit was filed by a woman named Karen, who had worked at the company for 8 years. While an employee, she worked jointly with Joni on her namesake show. Everything was great until Karen began dating another Daystar employee. Although dating amongst employees did not go against company policy, Joni wasn't having it. The lawsuit states that on January 11th, Joni instructed Karen to terminate her relationship with the other employee. But it wasn't just a comment she made. Joni berated, belittled, and harassed Karen for 2 hours, telling her that she had shamed Daystar and Joni. She went on to call Karen a liar and a bad example, and also told her she was unhealthy. As if that wasn't bad enough, Joni went as far as to ask Karen inappropriate questions about her relationship. But no one at the company made any such demands on the male employee Karen was dating. Joni then demanded that Karen go to counseling sessions with Fred and Anna Kendall, Marcus and Joni's 2 good friends who went on Dr. Phill with them and are regular on-air Daystar contributors. Karen didn't feel comfortable with that, so Joni said she would go with Karen to counseling, and as if that wasn't awkward enough, Karen refused because she knew that when other employees saw the Kendalls for counseling, the Kendalls gave Joni all the information that was disclosed to them in their private counseling sessions. And while some may say that's illegal because it's a HIPAA violation for a therapist to share information about a client without their consent, well, yes and no. The law sees things differently with any matter pertaining to a church. The law very rarely likes to get involved with what they call clergy matters and a church's religious doctrine. And if it happened inside the church, it's considered a religious matter. Being that the Daystar TV network was considered a church, they could allegedly get away with more. Then, without Karen's consent, Joni gave the Kendalls personal information about her. Karen was an employee who had received the highest overall rating of clearly outstanding in a recent performance review, and now she was being harassed because Joni was seeing red since she started dating someone. Lisa's version of events at Daystar seemed to check out with what's documented in court records. Marcus and Joni were treated like royalty as they walked the halls of Daystar. Employees would be excited if they were acknowledged by one of them, and people went out of their way to please them. What the Lambs wanted, the Lambs got. This halo effect also extended to all the Lamb children after they graduated college and began working at Daystar full-time. One former employee recalls feeling like Jonathan was the black sheep of the family. She used the words meek and mild when describing him, saying at the time she thought of him as weak and was worried the rest of the family would eat him alive. She would find out later that Jonathan was anything but weak. While everyone got along pretty well, Rachel began building a not-so-great reputation. A former art director in Daystar's marketing department by the name of Morgan Ferris shared that Rachel, while still in college and before she worked at Daystar, would come in at random with ideas of a photo shoot or a Christmas special she wanted to do. And the marketing employees who were under strict deadlines had to drop everything to accommodate her every wish. There was no saying no to Rachel, and Morgan said that when it came to her little pet projects, Rachel was, quote, very unreasonable and very demanding. Morgan said the entire marketing department dreaded when Rachel would come in. Morgan also confirmed that Rachel spoke down to Daystar staff and would even yell at them. And when it came to Rachel's feelings towards her big brother Jonathan, Morgan said, quote, it was well known within the company that Rachel really resented the fact that Jonathan would inherit the company. She just made it very clear that she felt like he wasn't worthy of it and that she was much more suited for that role and he wasn't competent enough for it. That was just the underlying baseline, how she operated and how she treated people. I should be running this place. This is my empire. End quote. Morgan went on to say that Daystar felt like Rachel's playground, like there were no guardrails and that no matter the budget or deadline, she got what she wanted, which was especially frustrating since Rachel was only 19 at the time and this behavior continued into her 20s. Morgan's problems weren't only with Rachel, however. She despised the prosperity gospel that ran rampant through her company. Once, during one of Daystar's semi-annual telethons, the prayer department was overwhelmed. The prayer department is basically Daystar's call center. It was a room with several hundred people in cubicles ready to answer the phones whenever viewers called in to donate their hard-earned money. Sometimes during large events, all Daystar employees had to be on standby because the call center would experience such high call volume. And if they needed more hands on deck, they would reroute calls to employees' phones. Morgan received a call from an elderly woman who was crying. She had been watching the telethon and wanted to donate, but she was in a huge amount of debt and had no money. Through her tears, she said she did have a little bit left on her credit card and she was going to give that to Daystar because the person on screen said if she gave $1,000 today, God would give her $10,000 back, and she really needed that $10,000. Morgan felt disgusted as she ran the elderly woman's credit card numbers and knew she had to get out of Daystar. She used the birth of her son as an excuse to leave the company. Morgan wasn't the only one who had problems working with Rachel Lamb. One previous employee who worked under Rachel in the marketing department said Rachel created such a toxic environment that she reported it to Joni, who immediately told her she was being judgmental and to move on. But after nearly a year of working under Rachel, things didn't get better, and the stress was beginning to affect this employee. So she asked to step down from the marketing department and take some time to work on her schooling. Later on, she thought she would like to work in Daystar's prayer department, so she applied for their entry-level position. When she arrived for the interview, she was shocked to find that Joni was sitting in, but she tried to act normal. At first, everything was fine, but then Joni asked the two men leading the interview to leave the room. Joni then turned to her former employee and told her she wanted her to have a teachable heart like Suzy. Joni told her she was on a 3-month probation period with one demand. She was to like and comment on Rachel's social media posts, but she wasn't supposed to tell Rachel or anyone else about why she was doing so. That very night, the employee liked and commented as instructed, and it wasn't long after that she received a text from Joni herself, saying that Rachel had reached out to her to ask if she had told that employee to like and comment. Joni told the employee that she told Rachel no, she hadn't said anything to her. Joni Lamb, the co-founder of a billion-dollar network that's in nearly every country in the world, tasked an employee with making sure her daughter's ego wasn't bruised while lying to her daughter at the same time. As the years went by, controlling and coercive seemed to become running themes with Joni. In 2011, after Jonathan and Suzy got married and Jonathan became Daystar's vice president, Joni began grooming Suzy to become the Daystar matriarch. It was no secret that Jonathan would one day take over Marcus's role as president of Daystar, and Joni wanted to teach Suzy the ins and outs while making sure her other children didn't get jealous. So in the middle of a workday, she would tell her employees and family members she was going to go get her nails done. But really, she was going to lunch with Suzy and giving her insider info. At first, it seemed like nice mother and daughter-in-law time together, but eventually, Joni became more controlling of Suzy, even telling her who she could and couldn't be friends with. Around 2015, Joni's nephew and his wife began working for Daystar. We'll call her nephew Bob. Bob was excited to get to be around his cousins Jonathan, Rachel, and Rebecca and their families. He and his wife truly believed they were blessed to have received such a job. The job also came with perks like free adjustments from Daystar's in-house chiropractor. There was just one problem. The chiropractor was unlicensed. He had lost his license because of an alleged assault on a minor. This is the only photo we have of him, taken at a Daystar Christmas party. Whether Marcus and Joni knew the man was unlicensed with a record, no one knows. But Joni told Bob that it was a company rule that whenever a woman was getting adjusted by him, another staff member had to be present. Bob, not knowing about the man's history, thought it was no big deal and made sure he was always present when his wife got adjusted. Everything was normal at first, but eventually the chiropractor began to say things that made Bob aware of the fact he didn't like him being there while working on his wife. In fact, the chiropractor seemed annoyed with Bob. He also made several comments about his wife's body during her adjustments. Then the annoyance turned to something else. The chiropractor texted Bob one day to say he wanted to take him and his wife out to dinner, but that wasn't all. After dinner, he wanted Bob and his wife to come over for a night swim in his pool. This was just too much for Bob, so he made Joni aware that he and his wife felt uncomfortable, and Joni did nothing. The unlicensed chiropractor was allowed to stay at Daystar, a decision that would lead to disastrous consequences when Suzy went to get an adjustment in January of 2017. He had already been giving Suzy adjustments for a couple years, and there hadn't been any problems. But Suzy began to notice antagonizing behavior from him. One time, he remarked that he knew how to snap someone's neck in seconds. On that fateful winter's day when Suzy went in for an adjustment and had a coworker in the room with her, she thought he may have been drunk. Suzy's coworker then said she had to go to the bathroom and left Suzy alone with him for around 5 minutes. While she was gone, the chiropractor violently essayed Suzy. As soon as she got away from him, she called Jonathan to tell him what happened. Jonathan was irate and called his parents to inform them what happened. Marcus and Joni were out of town, but Marcus told his son not to say anything and that he'd handle it. When Marcus and Joni returned several days later, Suzy said Joni told her that Marcus paid off the chiropractor and he wouldn't harm her again. She then told Suzy, "We need to protect Daystar, and I want to protect you, so don't say a word about it to anyone."
Suzy, one thing that you did say was that there was an assault against you as well. I talked with Joni the night that my first broadcast went up, and she said she just denied all of your allegations, and she said that was a very nice man. Now, he's passed, is my understanding, if I'm correct about that. But he's just a really nice man, and Suzy just makes stuff up.
That's crazy.
I believe you.
The man was belligerent for a while.
He showed up that day intoxicated.
Everyone was nervous with this Dr. Keith. I have no words. I cannot believe she said that. Wow. I thought she would at least, I mean, it's undeniable. I thought she would at least say, yeah, that was
I remember clearly the trauma when Suzy called to tell me what had happened. And it's like she was just in shock, like that it actually had happened. And I just felt like such a rush of anger that this had happened. And so I called my parents. They were in Hawaii at the time. And my dad was just like, okay, we'll take care of it. So taking care of it was basically, we will pay this guy off. They paid him a nice sum of money and probably had him sign an NDA. I don't know for sure.
No, I think just his last payment, maybe.
And then they sent him on his way, and that was the last time he was on the property.
Paid him after he assaulted the daughter-in-law. Why not call the police and get him reported and go through an investigation?
Well, and again, that just shows you, because Suzy was not comfortable to even share that story. She did not want to have to share. But given that our daughter's story was out there, Suzy wanted to stand in solidarity with our daughter. And again, it also just shows the pattern of cover-up at Daystar. You know, it's better just to kind of turn a blind eye to this. It's better not to report it because of what could happen if you do report it. It could obviously bring attention, and it could. They just didn't want to have that blowback.
I'd like to add one thing. I'll say this because hearing that is obviously heartbreaking. Because I remember when she came back from Hawaii and they pretended like nothing ever happened. So I was expecting a conversation. So I said, "Is Marcus mad?" She goes, "Oh yeah, that was not okay. But let's not talk about it. I got to protect you. Got to protect Daystar. And so I was like, "Oh, okay." But we paid him off. Marcus paid him, and he's gone. You won't see him again. And I thought that I genuinely believed that was their protection for me. I didn't see Daystar as a factor. I just thought they did what was right for me. And I was okay with it. I remember 2 or 3 days later, Rachel was really angry. And I don't want to be vindictive in saying this story, but there's a point for me saying this. She said, look what we've lost because of you. Great. And I remember going home and crying because I was like, I didn't want them to lose anything. Yeah. I didn't know.
What did she mean? They lost massages Because you reported.
They lost the convenience because he would come up to Daystar
Yeah, the chiropractic
and he'd be able to
adjustment.
give adjustments, from the convenience of just
Sure,
going
and lots of companies do that. Like it's a benefit, right?
Yeah.
Part of the benefit
Absolutely.
is not having a drunk guy sexually, SA, on company dollars, and then they get away with it, and it's covered over. This seems to be part of the whole problem.
Yeah.
And Suzy wouldn't say a word about it. She'd honor her mother-in-law's wishes and try to protect the empire they had built. That is, until several years later when her own daughter was SA'd by a member of the family and Joni allegedly tried to silence her 5-year-old granddaughter, victim blame, and protect the perpetrator. Jonathan and Suzy would stay silent no more, and the entire house of cards would come crashing down in spectacular fashion, including the death of Marcus Lamb. The remaining members of the family would be cast into an all-out war against one another, with Joni going as far as to allegedly try to silence the victim and secretly put a tracker on her son's car. This wholesome, picture-perfect family would become involved in scandal, cover-up, infidelity, secret recordings and intimidation, spiritual abuse, and betrayal. All that and more will be covered in Part 2 of The Rise and Fall of Daystar.
I woke up, opened my eyes and looked out to the darkening skies. The world has gone crazy as blood fills the streets. Steal, kill, destroy, the cycle repeats. But we cannot give in to these destructive forces that many digest like a meal with 5 courses. Like wild running horses, we flee from the truth and drink.
Sign up for Delete Me now using the link in the description box or the QR code. Thank you to Delete Me for sponsoring this video.
But don't lose heart and don't you